God, this comic book sucks. It genuinely makes no sense. Stories. Much of our human life is spent in the pursuit of finding fulfilling stories. Once the basic needs of shelter and subsistence have been met, the next desire in the hierarchy of needs is often entertainment. We have caribou for the winter. Want to see what's on the cave baiting tonight, dear? Oh, horses, again. Awesome. Some enjoy books, others film. As for me, I happen to take great joy in the electronic interactable media produced in Asia, specifically Japan, also known as JRPGs. And today the JRPG we'll be discussing is Metaphor e Fantazio, specifically its secondary storyline, the follower story, which runs parallel to the main arc of the game. These 14 characters flesh out Metaphor's world in their own unique way, but that begs the question, which follower has the best story? As the next layer of the hierarchy of needs after shelter, sustenance, and entertainment is proving your opinion is correct amongst your peers. I'll be delivering unto you my annual tier list, because if I make more than one tier list video a year, you may officially label me a hack, as I've obviously run out of ideas. Before we proceed, yes, this will contain some spoilers, as I'll be roughly recapping every single Bond episode to completion to provide some context in case you forgot what happens in the Bond. And yes, this will be a little nitpicky, okay? Sorry. I love Metaphor's character writing. It's very strong. And with storylines containing 8 episodes as opposed to, 10, there's not a lot of fat to trim. So the criteria we'll be judging them on is, does it boost the core message of the game? Does it, give it a new twist? Does it grant us some new perspective that the main story does not? So with all that taken care of and formally out of the way, let's start at the very start with Galika. And does she even count? She is the only character whose bond level advances automatically at fixed point in the story, and when they do appear, they tend to end off a specific arc of the game.
Oh, shucks. I wish I could have done more back there. Well, time to work extra hard. Wow, I can't believe this person joined us. Bond rank up.
That one's verbatim. That's exactly what happens. Being your first companion, she has memorable moments in the story. They're just not in her Bond story. Even the biggest fans of her would have a hard time trying to rationalize any other placement other than dead last. Sorry. Moore is in a similar situation to Galika. For story reasons, the writers cannot divulge every aspect of his character, and much of the initial tutorialization falls onto his hands to guide the player across Uchronia. Once you get past that, though, I always look forward to finishing his quests and returning to Academia, just for a sliver of new information on his backstory and what Academia was, why the king would imprison him here. Oh wait, the king might not have imprisoned you here? What is going on with you, Moore? Make up your mind! Then over half of his 8 bonds, yes, I checked, are spent delivering no new information. There is fun foreshadowing to be had during some of the dialogue, but it's drowned out by him speaking about the virtues, archetypes, and the nature of the royal magic. It can be easy to forget what these discoveries of his character are by the time you finish your next assignment. Not to mention, once you reach rank 8 for story reasons, there is no payoff or development to be had. Rank 8! You'd think he'd have recovered some of his memories, but no. We're left in the dark, and it just doesn't feel final. Unlike Galika, much of his story exists outside of his bond, so, technically better than Galika, but that's not saying a lot. Stroll. He is the Superman of Metaphor e Fantazio. Outside of being slightly catty on 1 or 2 occasions in the main quest, he truly is a selfless noble with a pure heart and desire for the world to be a better place. Sadly, diplomacy is not on the table, so he must cut down Luis and his men. His first bond technically starts with his explosive awakening and battle against Klinger, he who perfectly encapsulates the hypocrisy of the opposition. For the remainder of the bond, his story is primarily about what happens after you beat the villain of the week and what is the order of operations to rebuild his house, and is doing so truly what his parents would want. The ones who supplied him with everything in his life are gone. How does he do right by them? And what precedes is a long-winded hunt to find the people of Halia a home. They go to Lord Hydron, who has homes that are vacant,
But not for free, no.
He learns of his inheritance and uses the inheritance to buy homes off of Hydrant. It's fine.
Like, yeah.
What if those in power who had the resources actually did help those in need instead of hoarding their wealth? That'd be sick.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Except, well, it does with Stroll. And we know his father was just like him. Meaning, yes, there are some affluent people who don't con and cheat their way to the top. And Stroll's the ideal noble who spends his inheritance responsibly, doing what his parents would want him to do. Even if the instructions were incredibly vague, he gets there in the end. I will say, though, I do appreciate the fact we get to see the ruined Halia. We get to go there twice, and they took the time to model it. And the finale lighting is very beautiful. That moment is earned after you quested for like what feels like forever to get the people some housing. And a game with a lower budget, yeah, we just got a picture of them. Would have been flat. It won't make you break out into tears, but does a decent job of fleshing out Stroll's insecurities and what happens to the survivors of the human attack. Just saying though, I'm not a rich noble, never gonna be in his position, cannot relate. Middle of the road makes sense. Nurus, he's got some more energy in the sense that for 6 levels of his 8 bonds, you're sitting in the same room, same camera angle, looking at his same bald old head. This is because Nurus' questline has you turning in each of the relics you find inside of dungeons, which has to result in the mandatory turn-in process, the mandatory quest complete screen, and the mandatory Nurus going, Eureka! And the mandatory bond up. It's tedious, is what it is. But divorced of the visual presentation, we're left with a story of a man past his prime of youth, pensive on the missed opportunities because he devoted himself to his craft, toiling away for hours and hours with no colleagues to keep him company. Apparently back in the day, he was handsome. Citation needed. But in hindsight, that may have just been a bit of self-flattery, as we learned Nurus' family was quite affluent. But now, well, at some point, all of life is just a series of things you wish you did differently. Upon a rewatch of all the bond levels, I found a lot to say positively about Nurus' bond. But the issue is the introduction is so samey, some of these great details you might glaze over just because the presentation's monotonous. Like Nurus being asked to participate in the Igniter experiments, or his failed flight experiments making him feel like he's playing everything too safe, to the ethics of science going too far in pursuit of personal validation at the risk of living beings. If you know even a tiny bit about world history, you know exactly what this is referring to, okay? So when you do eventually get your hands on some WMDs, instead of trying to build some fantastical, life-changing device, Nurus just smashes it with a hammer. He no longer is in that musty, old manner. He's older, wiser, and wants to continue to live in a world with his found family, instead of harnessing all this old world tech for his own satisfaction. I wouldn't call it an arc per se. He's mostly static, but sticks to his principles that he slowly unravels to you through your journey. Nurus. It's not gonna sell any plushies anytime soon, let's be realistic about it. But there's a lot to chew on here for the enlightened intellectuals. I'm not one of them, so C looks good. Maria is, in my eyes, a pretty underrated character. Initially, I thought, while her bond was tragic, being a half-blood, recently orphaned girl in a big city, it didn't break any new ground. But under a microscopic lens, this is very well-designed bond story that cleverly guides the player into understanding Metaphor's message if you stick with it. Now, I'll admit, sticking with it is hard. During my playthrough, Maria was not my first pick to spend time with. Can you blame me? Empathy fatigue is a thing. She's in the slums of a gray city, and her father, who she rarely sees, is never coming home again. The adults in her life also can't tell her why that is. Granted, it's not like she'd believe us. That was absurd. But at some point in our lives, we were all a helpless child, confused at the way the world is, and we feel the frustration that we're powerless to change it because, well, we're a baby. Why are mom and dad fighting? Why can't I make them stop? Why are those kids at school so mean to me? One person left my life. What if more do? Maria is going through all of that. And I feared this would be the entire bond. But no. At the halfway point, Fabian pulls Will aside and is like, what is going on with Maria? And the bond gets a second wind. Reassured that her stepmother loves her, and yes, Fabian and Grius, they were dating. His rogue Riz is canon. It's in the memorandum. Check for yourself. The bond begins anew. Maria, not wanting to be complacent with her circumstances, intends to spread joy to others and give some much-needed humanity to the survivors of poverty in the row, showing just who the antagonist's ideology would be snuffing out if they have their way. Men who were skilled but down on their luck when someone else took their kindness for weakness. And a child who, it's been so long since they had anyone in their lives, they've nearly forgotten their name because no one calls them that anymore. It's just, what are they supposed to do? It's a kid. Come on. I go as far as to say Maria's bond not being in metaphor would make the entire game worse. Because it doesn't just provide you with an entertaining story, a heartwarming, tale about Maria getting her groove back, but fleshes out everything else. It makes you really think, dang. Yeah, complete destruction of everybody that's weak would suck. That's just not fair, right? Easy! A rank. Hulkenberg. Being the pseudo-mascot of Metaphor Fantazio, it's understandable Hulkenberg will have a lot of fans, and I understand because I am one. I'm saying nothing new by pleading my absolute adoration for this elf woman, but it's due to my questionable devotion that it pains me to say this. Hulkenberg's bond sucks. It's terrible. For the entire bond, you're dealing with how to confront Hulkenberg's old friend, who she believes to be solely the reason he has started to execute traitors with increasing zeal, after she was promoted due to her house connections, while Rodanthe was not and sent to the front lines, believing that he lost out due to nepotism, despite apparently being really close friends with Hulkenberg. He must have known how equally matched they were. Despite this, though, he holds a grudge, and when they have their duel to see him disbarred, he cheats and is finally arrested thanks to the Shadow Guard. The issue here is that, yes, there are some funny scenes, and Hulkenberg's concern for her former friend is touching. But Rodanthe, did you remember his motivation? Until I told you, you probably didn't. From your point of view, he's just killing people to kill people because he's evil. You learn this motivation way too late for me to take him seriously, and so much of the bond is spent on just him. Sure, he felt betrayed because Aislinn ran away from her duty. But given he's doing this, just executing people that slightly go against the knighthood, I feel like he would have done this anyway. I feel like if he got promoted, he would have ended up doing this. That's the vibe I get. Hulkenberg, the world does not revolve around you. It is okay that you did not want to do a job and you fled from your duty. Her life is her own to live. And I guess I just wanted to learn more about her and less about Rodanthe's odd grudge, because the end result is just a bit bland compared to Metaphor's other side stories. The truth is, Hulky's best moments are not in her bond, but in the main story, which is fine since, we got to see so much of her because she joined so early, but man, I wanted more. I guess she gives us bugs, and that's kind of cute, but that's really all it's got going for it. Catherina, Gran, the rival candidates in Metaphor Fantazio, are one of my favorite elements. Having these characters riding around in their respective gauntlet runners at the start gave me this unparalleled sense of excitement. And each of them has just the right amount of detail in their design to convey so much without taking up too much time from the main story. In game, you hear what their ideologies are, their platform, and why they do what they do. And Catherina has the most love and care put into her. Different from the other candidates, she gets the biggest spotlight, but instead of debating her on a podium, she tracks you down in the wild and takes on your whole squad. Solo. She gets flustered about this, and they explain why she is in the running. This happens a few times until you hit Altaberry, where her dreams come crashing down in the most heartbreaking way. The Parapus tribe is destitute. Catherina, having made a name for herself by getting a knife from a stranger, living in the wilderness, wants to return the favor and free her tribe from its oppressors. But with her limited lens on the world, she targets the upper class and their riches divorced of context on how they got their coin. Maybe it's a good thing Stroll's inheritance was hard to get. Catherina might have grabbed it, I don't know. The problem is, each revolution begins with a vague idea of wanting things to be better than they are now. But without time to process the true antagonist that you aim to overthrow, your movement can be directed by bad actors. This happens with Manahat in Catherina's story, who plants the idea of thieving and mugging people en masse, nobles, merchants alike, because, well, they were wronged in the past. Catherina, after speaking to Will and gaining inspiration from Utopia, confronts Manahat and convinces the Parapists to instead earn their keep by learning a trade and working towards a future they can be proud of, instead of continually looking for a handout. It's a cautionary tale on how people can use your desire for change to fuel their own agenda to service themselves. And how does one get ahead with the hand they are dealt with? I mean, it's easier said than done. If nobody ever gives you a chance, what are you gonna do? Stealing from people? Well, that's one way to go about it, but it only is a band-aid for a bullet hole. I would say Catherina does have a decent arc. I tend to empathize with characters with grand ideals who haven't necessarily ironed out all the details yet. Yuko from Nocturne was similar in that regard. To me, it's a relatable feeling. Who doesn't have an idea of how the world should be run? But do we possess the ability to create that change? At least for me, no, I'm average. And I'm not gonna pretend I'm some beacon of brilliance, okay? But I do know there are things I can do here and now, like not giving up, even though we had a rough start. So yeah, it's simple, and Catherina's trying to run us off the road. It's a little annoying in that regard, but it's uplifting and a genuine look at how the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's a better story and conclusion than Hulkenberg, even if the moral really boils down to the proverb of thieves don't read, and readers don't steal. Which personally, I disagree with. I did not buy any of these books. That'd be like $700. No thank you. Brigita. We meet the arms dealer in Grand Trad pretty early on in our journey, and it's here we're introduced to the artificial magic of its world, igniters. Brigita Lycon is directly profiting from selling these weapons, and metaphor goes into the uncomfortable reason why someone would choose such a career path. She doesn't want to do this, but this is the best means she has to survive, even if it means selling her soul to the man. After completing a mission to clear a supply route, we take on another job, this time to babysit Brigita's dog. She makes it clear to us that she doesn't care about the pet, to such a degree she doesn't even have a name for it, until the dog is stolen and Brigita has nothing left but her rage for the culprits. She is moments away from raising the perpetrator's settlement with a private army. She has a private army, by the way. When she realizes she has been duped, as the village is nothing more than a scapegoat for the true perpetrators, the Sanctus Church. In contrary fashion to other bonds, Brigita's story arc doesn't deal with a new character introduced, solely for Will and the follower to have a villain to take down. The villain of this bond is the faceless antagonistic force of the whole game, the Sanctus Church, and by extension of them, those who want to create division so they may directly profit. Kinda like real life, wow. The reality is Brigita deep down is good at what she does, and it's given her the safety and security, but she's not ignorant to the clientele she serves. The rich and already strong may purchase her igniters, and the weak can just fend for her themselves, like she did. But because of this, she has this internal conflict of surviving in this living hell of a world despite her initial circumstances, and the reality that by participating in this business, she's indirectly hurting others that were in the same position she was once in. This is made incredibly clear when news breaks that the village she visited was burned down by the Sanctus, and the sole survivors, young children, want her head, using the very same weapons that she distributes. It's quite possible, had the hero not been there, that Brigita would have not attempted to stop the children from taking her life, feeling her death was justified. But instead, thanks to Will, restoring a speck of hope in Brigita's life, she reasons with the children that killing her will solve nothing. A resolution is reached, she takes in the kids. She also attempts to right her wrongs in a way, only selling igniters with their destructive power reduced to wean the populace off of them. And it's just so wonderful. There really is no wasted time in this bond. And while shooting the shaggy dog is an overplayed trope, it worked well in this context because Brigita, she's scary. But you need to empathize with her quickly to get the story rolling. And hey, a pet, That's kind of cute. That does the job. Also just a fan in general of how she isn't the kindest person to the hero. I'm pretty tired of main character privilege in a lot of media, where the hero just waxes philosophical at the side character and they're like, wow, never thought of it like that. Here, that happens and Brigita's like, well, this guy was a sheltered turd. Like, she's right. But that seed of hope is planted nonetheless, and it eventually blooms when the world is painted red with Magla. It's a mature take on a self-made millionaire coming to terms with the fear of poverty being less important than the effects their actions have on the world around them. And I can't even pretend there's anything I'd change about it. Like, it's near perfect. I just personally connect with other stories a tiny bit more. I could not imagine Metaphor without Brigita. She is that important to the plot and fleshes out the world building in a pretty clever way, if I'm being honest. Easy S tier. Barden. Following the events of Martyra, there's a power vacuum in governing the populace. Barden seems like the obvious pick. He's likable, a bit of a handyman too, and he loves this town more than anything. The only problem is, he loves his town more than anything. He has nothing. His wife and child left him when he took too long to return from a mission, and they assume he died. Losing them, his biggest weakness is that he just loves too much. And this clouds his judgment as he starts to ramp up security in Martyra and station guards on every corner. The village doesn't take too kindly to Big Brother spying on them on all hours of the day and holds a vote to kick Barden out, as they think the Sanctus Strohl is better suited for the job. Sandworm shows up. Strohl pees his pants. He's out of there. Barden, he's staying put. He saves the day. Well, he gives a Star Rakaja, then we save the day, but it's the thought that counts. Hearing what happened, Strohl concedes power back to Barden. He promises to do better in the future, and it's a servable story about a man lacking pretty privilege, I guess that's a part of it, who is way in over his head. And due to the lens he sees the world through, he acts in a way he thinks is best, with no system of checks and balances. There is an arc, but it's an obvious arc. It's straightforward. You've probably seen this happen in an after-school special. It's not my favorite. You understand why Barden is doing this. He tells you in rank 3, like, my wife's gone, kid's gone. Not bad, do something dumb. And frankly, I would have just preferred if we learned about his family post getting knocked out by the sandworm. That would have even made sense. He's like, oh, I realized I've been such a fool. I saw my wife and lad when I was knocked out by the worm. I've been acting a right fool. They told me so. Then he gets his act together. He runs the town happy ending. But they didn't do that. I realize this is a nitpick. I warned you in the intro, okay? But when I don't have nitpicks for other bonds, naturally Barden's got to go a little bit lower. There are themes of which way being the best way to rule and the fear of taking a stand. Doing something you believe, even if you're scared to do it. It's just not done in a novel way. Is that bad? Is that should I dock points for that? I don't know. I'm doing it. It's my list. Now we got to talk about Heismay. His bond is on a whole different level. He failed to protect his son. You know this. It's like the main element of the game. He was trampled during a riot. And then he left to the sandworm caves. He just was hoping to die there. But now, things are different. He seeks a proper burial for his son. And you'd think this bond would be super depressing. But it's not. It's filled with a lot of stuff, not just sadness. I mean, that's there too, but it's filled with hope and introspection on this old man, on what he could have done better, and reminiscing on the good times with his son, how he used to play in the field. And in the end, Heismay believes the best location to bury his son, after trial and error, is his old village. But it's been so long since he last visited, he cannot help but feel worried, as despite growing up in the town, he's now an outsider in their eyes. They fear him so much, they steal his dead child's remains. Now, as evil as that last sentence was, we get context for their backwards way of thinking, which I know is crazy. I'm trying to rationalize that, but hear me out. Due to a trade dispute they were caught in between, the village is now mostly self-sufficient. For so long, they see anything outside their bubble as a threat, Heismay included, despite being of the same tribe. The vast majority of Metaphor's plot and side content addresses the persecution of minority tribes in Uchronia, but Heismay's bond takes it a step further. Even between tribes, there will be in-groups and out-groups, a social psychology paradigm that not even the main villain, in all their wisdom, considered. In my eyes, this village is a microcosm of Japan as a whole. And not just because, Heisman's got a samurai sword and he drinks from like a sake thing. Okay? I mean, that is, mostly it. But many of the issues that modern day Japan face can be blamed on their fear of foreign influence and wanting to stick to the old ways. And it's during Heismay's speech we see why the writers are concerned. This rigid and xenophobic mindset that the elders were taught will be taught to the next generation. And nothing will truly change if this attitude towards other tribes doesn't shift. Heismay gets the urn back, saving his son from being left in some ditch somewhere, and yet he returns to save the children who did him wrong, capping it off with deciding to take his son on his travels so they will always be together. Heismay is already the best written character in Metaphor, and the creators did not shy away from depicting a realistic view of an old man going through the stages of grief, who eventually finds a way to move forward in the first time in a long time, which feels congruent to the main story's advancement. You can't start the last stages of this until you're very far into the main story. Fun fact. And also the fact that it showcases intertribal prejudice and how that can be a thing, because that is definitely a thing in our real world. Think about it. That makes it an easy S tier because it goes above and beyond the themes of the game and really makes us think how silly and petty a lot of our differences truly are. He lived there. He was gone, 30 years? Come on. You stole his kid. That's messed up. Easy S tier. Alonzo. Alonzo is one of the more memorable introductions in Metaphor, because we're introduced to this street-smart rogue who lies through his teeth to achieve his goals, and fleece others of their coin, who promises to teach us his ways if we just remember who he is when we become king. Shortly after this, though, the landowner Dartrum, his target he hopes to squash to alleviate his village's overtaxation, burns down his entire village and kills his mom. In rank 3. Crying out loud. What? Why? After this segment, you are glued to the screen. I don't care who you are. This is subverting your expectations done properly. You think, oh, he's this, charismatic guy. He's been at this a while. No, he sucks. He got played, and people died as a result. After convincing him to not throw his life away, he proceeds to do what he does best and hatch a new, better plan, and abducts the landlord. But this time he came prepared, and he has information on the guy. His target is cornered, but he can't kill him, because he too has a family and is also being extorted by a more powerful figure. Having his daughters under close watch of this noble, I assume, Alonzo's got a bigger threat to stop. With this information, his next, even bigger scheme is to, I guess, run away, in retrospect, taking the blame for his mother's death, the village's destruction, and all his other sins. He sacrifices himself in Browhaven Square in a dramatic and shocking scene. Except he comes back and he didn't actually die. When you're not glued to the screen, this one does not make any sense. Alonzo disappears. How did he do it? We don't need to know. To protect the landowner, I get that. But also to give money back to, his village that, he hurt. We could have done that without gaslighting the hero. Could we not? I give it high praise for breaking conventions and having a story that concludes outside of the 8 bond level. That's meta. That's cool. I didn't see that coming. No story from this developer has tried that yet, to my knowledge. But when you get that letter, and it's like, oh, I'm alive, by the way. He could have just not shown up. It would have made more sense if he was aloof. He's back in Browhaven, the place where he supposedly died. I want to say the central theme here is that fiction is important. I lied to you. That was a lie. It was fiction. But I don't know. Does that work? Is gaslighting the moral to take away from here? It's highly entertaining. Don't get me wrong. That's mainly why it's an A tier. But genuinely, I can't help but feel like you didn't have to lie to Willie. Maybe it's to teach him a moral that yes, people are terrible, they will lie to you, so always be shrewd. Perhaps. Regardless, it's a roller coaster, and I love me a roller coaster. But you wouldn't call a roller coaster fine art, would you? Maybe. Anyway, A tier, because it's not really compatible with the main theme of Metaphor, if I'm being honest. From one Nadia to another, we have Lady Juna. After killing some bird, we become Juna's escort. During a shopping spree in Brawlhaven, the songstress is roped into performing in a charity event, much to the dissatisfaction of Myrtis, a rising star who believes Juna robbed Myrtis of her position. In retaliation, she incinerates Juna's dress for the event and threatens to surround the stage with poisonous flowers if she dares to perform. For charity! The day of the concert arrives, and Myrtis is so moved by Juna's performance, she cancels the flower arrangement and realizes the error of her ways. Juna is a person who embodies the arts and was just the better performer. How can Myrtis live with herself? If only there was some way to redeem her. Oh, hey, some conveniently placed poison. Now the remainder of the bond is spent learning not only Juna's life prior to meeting Rilla's family, but uncovering the truth of the Nadia as a whole. As to get the cure for Myrtis' poison, you're gonna have to get some flowers, which, yeah, Juna doesn't have a great history with. In case she accidentally transforms, yes, the Nadia people are the halfling / hobbits of Metaphor's world, and you don't obtain this critical piece of lore unless you participate in Juna's bond or look at a very specific wall in the Elden Sanctum. Put two and two together. There's a chance you just missed that entirely. That's crazy. And frankly, I just think it's beautiful that Juna is so driven to save this girl's voice from the poison. A girl who is pretty diabolical to her, because she recognizes how important performing is to Myrtis, because it's important to her. And maybe at one point in her life, she too envied the divas before her debut. Juna was imprisoned near these poisonous flowers when she was a slave child, and the only thing that kept her sane at that time was song. The belief that she may escape her captor, and she did. That's beautiful. Showcasing the chief theme of Metaphor, that art, dance, fiction, singing are just devices to help us cope with anxiety and keep us marching forward. Fiction can literally be hope that keeps you surviving. It's a pretty straightforward message in-game called Metaphor, okay? But I like things that are succinct and get the point across sometimes. And this did a great job. The shock of seeing Juna's true form, though, I mean, yeah, that helps it stand out. But even if it didn't have that, I think this would stand on its own two legs. While I don't personally view the bond as romantic, I do think it's pretty touching that of all the people she could choose to escort her to the flower field, it's the hero, showing how far they have come since their first introduction, I guess. Wasn't technically her first introduction, but it's funnier. We use that clip in every video. I'm gonna put it in every video, just a heads up. Do we have any nitpicks? Of course we do. It's a JohneAwesome video. Juna's a spy? Is she really gonna be like,
What a wonderful performance. If only there was something to drink.
like, come on. I ain't buying it. She's a smart cookie, okay? But they had to get her to the flower fields to have the lore done. I get it. Writing's hard. Story takes a little while to get going, but its inclusion only elevates the game's main motif, so I guess big points from me, while providing background lore on the game's world. Pretty big boons, in my opinion. I also empathize with Myrtis. She's a believable villain, if you can even call her that. Like, who doesn't get jealous? And maybe as an entertainer, I can put myself in her shoes and realize, yeah, I also get jealous of people that are better than me. And I get upset when people comment, I'm only watching this till Markiplier uploads more. He's not gonna upload more, okay? Just freaking watch me. I'm not gonna burn his dress though. Does he have dress? Let's move on. My point is, jealousy, sometimes it's a healthy thing. You can respect your betters and want to be better than them. Develop a healthy rivalry. And honestly, that impresses me a lot. It's not the best in A tier, but it's pretty darn good. Why they draw her naked? Like, that's really out of pocket. I don't care if you're a robot. Put on some pants. Jesus. Oh, what are we talking? Oh, yeah. Yufa, she is next. And sadly, I'm not the biggest fan of the bond, let me specify. Sadly, with the metaphor's other magical girl, I can't help but feel a little let down with how her bond was handled. Emphasis on hand, I guess. Yufa's arc in the main story involves her unearthing the history of her island's beliefs, and in her side story, she applies the lesson she learned on the island to Browhaven Sanctists. Smelling something fishy, Yufa and the hero find themselves in front of a Sanctus church with a peculiar stench. Despite others in the region disliking Yufa because of her background, Hyperic, the overseer of the church, teaches her about Sanctism. The key thing to note here is that Sanctists believe anxiety is something out of your control and can only be handled with prayer or with God's intervention. Yufa, given all she's been through at the Dragon Temple, doesn't necessarily agree with this teaching. We hear sounds in the church and eventually go back to investigate to find a sick room swirling with bad magla. Yufa encourages Hyperic to relocate these people, which would pretty much cure them instantly. But he ignores her because, well, yeah, she is trespassing, but also because Hyperic is oblivious to the Mustari people's ability to see magla. During our next snooping sesh into the church, we find that Hyperic is gone, and he has taken those in the basement to be purged in a volcano. We also head to the volcano to stop the sacrifice and succeed. However, Hyperic falls. Uchronia's version of Jonestown is stopped, and finally, Yufa gets it through the skulls of the congregation that, blind faith. It's not such a good thing after all. And it's not going to solve all your problems. You have to do some things yourself, okay? Then the two hold hands on the Gauntlet Runner, which is very sweet. I actually have zero complaints about this event. It is earned after Yufa, went through 2 religious sacrificing events. She's like, no, I want to protect you so bad. I'm tired of being the one protected. Like, that's awesome. She's aware just how easy it is for lives to come to an end, right? But unlike other characters, bonds, this one feels a little redundant. Yes, people perform human sacrifice. It's insane, backwards, barbaric, ironic because the mainland views the Mustari in that fashion, but it's artificial in the sense that this is a situation for Yufa to solve, and only her. Yes, the girl with the magic eye just so happens to find people going through the exact dilemma she solved a month ago. The fear of the unknown and taking the first step, even though you're scared, to fix a dilemma are strong lessons. I just wish they were explored through a different lens because, man, this one just did not do it for me. It did it well the first time on Etria. I just wish Yufa's bond explored a different dilemma or paradigm. Or it was just her and Will holding hands for 8 ranks. That would have been better, actually. I don't know. Because what we have currently in Metaphor is, like I said before, redundant. That and Joe versus the Volcano featuring Tom Hanks is by far the better volcano-centric media. It's not even close. C-tier, baby! And lastly, Basilio Magnus of the Magnus Brothers. Oh boy, after the sudden death of his brother by Luis's hand, he is not sure how to cope with this loss. Who is prepared for that? That's when he runs into an old friend from the Igniter experiment days that he never thought he'd see again, Vinka, who managed to escape. He has grown a lot since then. The two of them have bad chest pains as a result of these experiments, but Vinka keeps lying to Basilio, saying, oh, it's nothing. Just funny because, he's going through the same exact thing. Basilio's a little naive. That's what you learn at the start. And at this time, Browhaven is also experiencing a series of gruesome murders. Gee, I wonder who's doing all them. And yeah, it's a bit obvious who the culprit is for the player, but it doesn't take long for Vinka to just like spill the beans. He's like, okay, I'm killing all these guys. Well, help, be pretty cool. We attempt to warn the black market dealer. He tells us to piss off because, well, he thinks we're about to scam him. Then he gets ripped in half by Vinka. Pretty fast, actually. Basilio tries to stop him, but it's too late. Vinka is just completely berserk. He teleports to where they dump the bodies after the experiments, and it's there that he is finally put to rest. Staying stagnant, being left a hollow husk after witnessing his close friend die at his hand, weeks after his brother just died in his arms, Basilio marches on. wanting to live a healthy life for those who couldn't make it, and create a nation where things like this can never happen again. During the course of Basilio's bond, we see him grow in a way that works well, given the structure of Metaphor's side story system. He's working towards being a more mature and less gullible person, discovering for himself what values he holds without his brother's guidance, going as far as to develop a plan all by himself and act more like a leader instead of a follower. I guess the main dilemma I have with this arc is, well, I'm just saying if it was me who had the superpowers to, kill my oppressors who dramatically ruined my life because I was born poor, I would have taken revenge too. But it's only in hindsight when Vinka discovers, Basilio's alive. Well, it's too late, bro, I already killed everybody. It's tragic. That's what I dig about it. Was Vinka in the right? Was Vinka in the wrong? It splits people down the middle. And that's the telling of a good story. But the more of saying, Vinka, murder is murder. He didn't know we were going to change the entire country in a year. Like, that's not on him. Should Vinka have gone through the official Ukrainian judiciary and filed a complaint and died before he saw justice done, or go after those sick freaks while he still can? Make them pay, Punisher style. But we know that if Basilio and him reunited just a little bit earlier, it's likely they would have never even came to that. They could have enjoyed each other's company with the little time that Vinka had left. It reflects the plight of the English street children with an atlus touch and fleshes out Basilio's character in such a flawless way. I just technically like Heismay's a tiny bit more. I swear they're like this. I swear to God. But that is the tier list. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know. At the end of the day, I'll say it again. All the Metaphor characters are incredible, but these are the bonds with the best entertainment value and stay true to Metaphor's themes. And also just the ones that I think were really interesting. All around, I had a ton of fun making this video, rewatching all the bonds, not separated. Catherine's, you start very early, then it takes a while to finish. You kind of forget what happens, but watching them all back to back, you're like, wow, these are some great stories we got here. Tell me, which bond is your favorite and why? And until next time, make sure to subscribe. Got some crazy Atlas videos on the way that I'm so excited to tell you about, but that'll be for some other day. If you don't want to miss it, you know what to do. See you next time. More videos coming soon. Bye.